Kyle, you're muted.
Yeah, it helps if I come off mute at the start of a webinar, doesn't it? I think we can go ahead and get started is what I was saying. Thank you all for bearing with us. Live theater, as they say. Hi, everybody. I'm Kyle Yoder. I'm the Associate Research Director at the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and I am very excited to welcome you to this month's Books and Ballot webinar. Today, we have a look back at ESRA 2026, and we're really excited to have a bunch of folks who presented work, who organized the conference here today to talk to you about the ESRA conference, about the conference this year in Phoenix, and about what they presented at that conference. So before we get started, I've just got a few housekeeping items for you. For those joining us for the first time, welcome. Books and Ballots first launched more than 2 years ago as a space where election professionals and researchers could share ideas, lessons learned, and other practical insights from the field. It's been incredibly rewarding to be a part of this community as it grows and to continue the conversations that strengthen election administration across the country. This year, Books and Ballots has expanded both in partnership and available resources. So in addition to the webinars, we now also have resources available through our Substack and as a podcast on Spotify. If you're listening to this on Spotify, hello. These efforts are a collaboration between Ready for Tuesday, the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and the MIT Election Data and Science Lab. Through all that growth, our goal remains the same: to showcase the most useful research for election officials. So, as I said, today's Books and Ballots conversation is a special one. We're looking back at this year's Election Science, Reform, and Administration Conference, or commonly called ESRA. This year's conference was the 10th annual, and it was hosted by Arizona State University in Phoenix, Arizona. Of course, not everyone across the country was able to make it to Phoenix in June. And so we're thrilled to have today's panelists on to share some of what we presented last month. We'll leave time toward the end for questions from you all in the audience, so please make use of the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit those as we go. And we are also recording today's conversation, so we will be sure to share out and distribute the recording afterwards. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my Books and Ballots co-host, which is one of her many hats, Karen Brinson-Bell.
Thanks, Kyle. I am especially excited about this episode of Books and Ballots since the three host organizations, ESRA, or CEIR, Ready for Tuesday, and MEDSL, all presented at the ESRA conference this year. And I also have the good fortune of being part of the ESRA Advisory Board, and by working with MIT Election Data and Science Lab as their election policy fellow, it really just brings all of this home to me, full circle, to do this webinar. I also, before we get into things, I want to point out that in selecting who would be part of the panelists, we had around 100 presentations, roundtables, panels, posters as part of this year's ESRA. But what we've done here is to actually sort of highlight a snippet of each. We've got information from our host, who is a non-governmental organization that is in the research and election science space. We've got one of the research organizations by having CEIR present. And then we have one of the academic spaces. So it kind of shows you how things are evolving in the research around election science. And so because we have three very distinct subjects today, we are going to change up our format just a bit. We normally go much more into conversation after the panelists introduce themselves, but we're going to start with having them introduce themselves and do their segment, giving their insight or presentation for about 5 to 7 minutes. We'll start with Bill Gates, and he's going to talk about being the conference host as well as the sessions that he conducted. Then we'll go to April Tan from the Center for Election Innovation and Research to go over the research that she presented at ESRA. And then last but not least, we have on hand two members of the winning poster team from the Engineering for Democracy Institute, Leone Otto and Adriana Esposito. And apologies if I didn't get anyone's name quite right. I will play the Southern Twang card if that helps me. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Bill, and then we'll shift to our other presenters as we go, and then get into that Q&A. And as Kyle mentioned, make sure to put your questions in Q&A and not just be dependent upon what I come up with. So take it away, Bill.
Thanks, Karen, and no problem for mispronouncing my name. It happens all the time. Thank you so much for including me in this webinar today. A lot of friends here. All three of these organizations that are hosting this webinar are friends and partners of where I work, the Mechanics of Democracy lab at Arizona State University. So I was an election official in Maricopa County for 8 years, and in 2024, I decided not to run again and instead came over here to model where we're supporting current elections officials as well as helping to train the next generation of elections officials. And that's why it was really such a thrill for us to have the opportunity to host the 2026 ESRA conference at Arizona State University. Specifically, it was held at the law school. So we had two partner organizations who helped us host. One was the Arizona Clean Elections Commission, which many of you may be aware of, kind of a unique body that we have here in Arizona that does a lot of work with campaign finance, has a public finance program that they run for candidates, but they also have a big focus on voter education. So they were great partners, as well as another one of my sister organizations at Arizona State University, the Center for Independent and Sustainable Democracy, which does a lot of research on independent voters and Gen Z voters. And so that kind of helps explain sort of where we went with some of the presentations at ESRA. Like Karen mentioned, we had an incredible number of speakers, panels, roundtables, and poster presentations, over 100 people in total who were a part of that. And, you know, I love ESRA because it is the one place, the premier place in the country every year where election academics and election practitioners come together. And I think it's just wonderful to see it's kind of the old Reese's peanut butter cup, the chocolate and the peanut butter coming together, and to see the collaborations that are born and the really fascinating discussions that take place. Like I said, we were located at the law school, and all of the meeting rooms you could reach without even going on an elevator. So I think it was very, very open area, including the food, so it was all there, and we were all able to collaborate and chat a lot. In addition to the presentations that have already been mentioned, we had two unique presentations we had for the 2026 ESRA. The first one on the first day was a Gen Z focus group. So we did something a little different. We brought everyone together, so there were no other competing panels or roundtables. Everyone came into what we call the Great Hall at the law school and looked in on a focus group. Now, if you know anything about focus groups, usually the focus group can't see the fact that people are paying attention to them. Here it was very transparent. And because of that, we were concerned that this focus group, which was made up of Gen Z voters, might have been intimidated, might have been timid, might not have expressed their opinions about elections administration. But we had an outstanding facilitator, and very soon it was like there was no audience there. And so the insights that we heard from Gen Z voters and their candid feedback on how they view elections and elections administration, I think was a real treat for everyone who was there. The other kind of unique piece that was part of the ESRA 2026 conference was that we held a mini AI and elections boot camp. So at Model, one of our initiatives is the AI and Elections Clinic. And so we've done several AI and election boot camps around the country. So we wanted to take that. These are usually day-long events, truncated it down into about 90 minutes, and got, again, election researchers, academics, and election officials in the room, as well as students. And it was really a lot of fun to see this group of people sort of address challenges that they face in elections, and then ideate on how AI might be a solution to address these challenges. Another part of the boot camp was finding out how the elections officials are using AI in their work. And to the extent that they're not using AI, why is it? Why is it that they're not using AI? What sort of barriers are there, either placed maybe by, their organizations or that they're feeling individually as elections officials? In addition to that, we also had two kind of fun, and again, I say fun with quotes because we're election nerds. So we had a baseball game the day before the conference started, and then the day after the programming completed, we had two tours of the Maricopa County Tabulation and Elections Center. We had almost 70 people who went, and I think everyone who went really enjoyed it. A great opportunity to see, frankly, one of the most famous tabulation centers in the country, to see all the work that's done there, and everyone received a personal tour from the leadership of Maricopa County elections. So just so grateful for our whole team that helped bring all of this together. I told Karen I wasn't going to talk about the weather, but it stayed under 110 degrees during the first week of June, so we felt like that was good. Everyone seemed to handle the heat all right, and we wish our friends in Asheville, North Carolina, the very best of luck as they will be hosting the 2027 ESRA conference, and I know that it is going to be a big success. But again, thanks to the ESRA board for giving us the opportunity to host here in Phoenix, and maybe in another 10 or 15 years, we'll put in the bid again after it goes all around the country. But if you haven't been to an ESRA conference, I highly recommend it to you. A great opportunity to meet folks and to learn the latest in the research that's going on. And there is truly incredible research that's being done by academics from coast to coast, as well as practitioners in our country. So with that, Karen, I'll turn it back to you.
Bill, and y'all really did knock it out of the park. I don't think that's why you held a baseball game leading up to it, but you sort of set the stage and set the standard. So thank you so much. We're going to get April on, and she'll share her slides to talk about the research that she's working on with active and inactive voters. Again, this was presented at ESRA. It's some ongoing research that she's doing through the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and I'll turn it over to her now.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, everyone. I'm April Tan. I'm the policy lead at the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and I'm here to talk about our ongoing research into active registration rates and list maintenance policies related specifically to inactivating voter records, and ultimately the importance of being clear and transparent about these processes. So if you haven't heard of us, we're a nonpartisan nonprofit that works with state and local election officials across the country to provide practical research and analysis about election administration, including on topics like list maintenance. So in this presentation, I'll go through some findings and key takeaways that we've identified in the process of this research and touch on some information on active registration rates. But most of this presentation is derived from our ongoing policy scam that aims to identify and categorize inactive triggers or the conditions that lead to a voter record being designated inactive. And to be clear, our scope only extends to what causes a record to become inactive, so it doesn't capture information or analyses on cancellations, removals, or other status changes. So initially, this project began as a data-driven exercise to collect and analyze active and inactive registration rates across the 50 states and DC. But to no surprise, we discovered early on in this process that states have different definitions of active and inactive. And given those different definitions, it's important to put registration rates in context. The state-specific policy context is important for understanding what the numbers actually mean in practice in different places. And that realization led us to try to find definitions for active and inactive in each state in DC, which is when we realized that not only is there variation in definitions, but there is significant variation in the processes that states use to designate records inactive. And while this variation is not inherently problematic, variation without clear explanations can create risks for election officials, the public, and researchers. Researchers run the risk of assuming things are more standardized than they are in reality. For the public, these risks are primarily around the generation and spread of misinformation. And for election officials, the risk is in assuming that everyone inactivates voters the same way they do, which may make it more challenging to explain why the processes in their jurisdiction are the way they are, and why it's not bad just because they differ from a neighboring state, for example. And when combing through the state resources, it became clear that states vary in the level and quality of transparency around registration rates and inactive processes. Some states had great public-facing dashboards, process maps, and explainers, but in other states we had to rely primarily on statutory language. But given how central voter lists and voter list maintenance is to election administration, and given the recent increased scrutiny on state voter lists, publishing clear guidelines and explainers for election officials and the public can help prepare officials to speak to their practices and reduce misinformation amongst the public. But back to active registration rates, CIR recently published a report on active registration rates in 2024. The QR code here will take you to that link, and my colleague Kira Flimke led the effort to collect these rates for the 50 states in DC, primarily using a combination of state website data and state outreach. And we calculated that the national average active rate was 85%, with values ranging from 60% to over 100% in one state. But half of states are within 5 percentage points of that 85% average. But as I noted, to better understand what these numbers mean in practice, we need to know more about how states define active and inactive. So the NVRA doesn't define inactive in statute, but broadly requires states to send confirmation notices to voters if information indicates they may have changed their residence. States are restricted from removing these voters until after 2 federal general elections of continued inactivity. And per federal regulation, registrants who have been sent but have not responded to the confirmation mailing and haven't since offered to vote are considered inactive. And while the NVRA sets some parameters for inactivating voters, as is typically the case in elections, state implementation of those procedures vary, which led us to wonder what conditions trigger the inactive process in different states and how do states actually inactivate those records. And to get at those questions, we dug into a bunch of state statutes, regulations, election procedures manuals, and other publicly available resources. We used broad search terms and then analyzed all of the information we found and logged it. To identify common trigger categories and areas of variation between states. And one last thing to note is that relying on publicly available information does limit what we can say about these policies in practice at this stage, but we hope to conduct outreach to verify the information we found and hopefully to fill in some gaps. So like I said, we identified some common trigger categories that we've listed here. The other category includes things like challenges, unverified registrations, unverified death records, and more. And as will be a common theme, states define and use these triggers differently. So for example, in Alabama, this trigger is pretty straightforward. If a voter doesn't vote for 4 years, their record is inactivated. Same category, but Hawaii is very different. In Hawaii, lack of voter-initiated activity is a trigger that election officials are authorized but not required to consider. And for clerks who do use this information to inactivate voters, the required period of non-voting is shorter. It's the past 2 years rather than the past 4 years. And it's also more expansive than just not voting. It includes a lack of other specified voter activity as defined in this regulation. And along with all of the different categories of inactive triggers, there are also additional dimensions of policy variation, which includes trigger type, such as whether officials are required or authorized to act on certain information, and trigger order, so whether a trigger is the first in a sequence of events, like receiving undeliverable mail, or whether the trigger is the final step in a sequence of events, like the voter not responding to a confirmation notice. In some places, a trigger can also be automatic, so something happens and it inactivates the record outright. There are also differences in sources of address change data used, type of address change matters, the entity that conducts list maintenance, the timing of various processes. And to add to the fun, state and local officials sometimes have discretion over the above items, which leads to even more variation in practice. And to highlight just one area of the many areas of variation, these 3 states, for example, have different timelines for the periodic list maintenance that's required by the NVRA. Timing may be based on proximity to an election, such as in California, every other year, as in West Virginia, and as Alaska here demonstrates, some states give election officials some discretion to determine the frequency of list maintenance within certain parameters. Not shown here, of course, is that the form of periodic list maintenance also varies significantly. So in conclusion, there's lots and lots and lots of variation in how states implement the NVRA and designate voter records inactive. Selfishly, as researchers, we would love to see more transparency and guidelines around these processes, but we also believe it would be beneficial ultimately to election officials and their voters. And that is our main takeaway for this presentation. And here are some QR codes to see our research on active registration rates, as well as a report on lessons learned from data transparency in Rhode Island. This presentation has really highlighted our work to date, but as part of our continuing work for the MedSol voter registration and list maintenance grant, we will continue gathering and analyzing information on inactive processes and registration rates. And if anybody has input on this research or related research, please reach out to us. We would love to learn more about how these processes actually work. My email is on the slide here if you'd like to reach out, and thank you very much.
Awesome, April. While our folks from University of Rhode Island come on, I'll just point you to the Q&A. You've already had a request for your slides if it's something you're interested in sharing or open to sharing. And I will turn it over now to Leone and Adriana and the winning poster from this year's ESRA. We're excited to have an opportunity to highlight this because when you're trying to go to all the sessions and see all the posters, it's hard to get that information, and it's often hard for us to share out the poster information post-conference. So this was an opportunity for you all to learn what was the award-winning poster and what their research is found. So take it away.
Hi everyone, we are with the Engineering for Democracy Institute, and today we're presenting our poster, which won the inaugural Dr. Robert Stein Award for Best Research Poster at this year's ESRA conference. My name is Leonie Otte. I'm a PhD candidate in Industrial and Systems Engineering at the University of Rhode Island, and with me is...
Hi, I'm Adriana Esposito, and I'm an incoming senior in Industrial and Systems Engineering at URI.
The title of our poster is Signature Verification by the Clock, Assessing Processing Time Throughout the Day. Let's talk a little bit about signature verification. Signature verification is being conducted in 32 states and Washington, D.C. Signature verification is happening usually in the middle of the process, like you can see in the flowchart diagram on the screen. It's like after the mail ballots arriving at the facility, they're getting scanned, the signatures, and then the verification is happening. Each mail ballot, the signature needs to be verified before the mail ballot can be opened and the ballot inside can be tallied. So kind of similar to the presentation beforehand, every state is doing it differently. There's no like clear standards to it. So it can vary across counties, even within the state, which can depend on like the availability of prior voter signatures or the verification instructions that are given to the election workers or the team size who are conducting the signature verification. The data that we're using for this poster was collected between 2022 and 2024 in the states of Utah and Colorado through time studies. Let's take a look at the statistical analysis. We have 4 counties which we observed for this study. 3 of these counties, which are like named as County 1, County 2, and County 4, who has 2 levels of signature verification. And then we have 1 county, which is County 3, who has 3 levels of signature verification. So kind of all of them have an initial level of signature verification where every signature is going through. And if a signature can't be matched in the first level, it goes to one of the advanced levels. If the signature can't be matched in one of the advanced levels in both of these states, the voter is getting informed about it and has a chance to cure their ballot. What we can see through the box plots is that the time that the election workers take to perform signature verification is longer for the level 2 compared to level 1, and also longer for level 2 over level 3 in County 3. Below that, we have scatter plots, one on the left side for level 1 and on the right side for level 2 and 3 combined, which are showing all the processing times which we collected throughout the day. What we can see for level 1 is that it's like toward the end of the day, it's way more like longer processing times compared to like earlier in the day. And then compared to level 2 and 3, level 2 and 3 have way more variation in their verification. a little bit about the process characteristics across these 4 counties. Some of the counties have a team of 2 to conduct level 2 of signature verification, and all counties have for level 1 reference signature available, and for level 2 and 3 more signatures available to compare them to the current signature, which is on the returned envelope.
So one of the main tools we used was an individual and moving range, or IMR chart. The top graphs for each county is the individual chart, which plots the time required to verify each signature over time. The center green line that you can see represents the average processing time, while the red lines are the upper and lower control limits. These control limits represent the expected range for normal process variation. The bottom graph is the moving range chart. So instead of looking at the process times itself, it measures how each observation differs from the previous one. Together, these 2 charts allow us to evaluate both process performance and process consistency. So when we're looking at these graphs, we want to determine if a process is out of control, in this case, our signature verification process. A process is considered out of control when it exhibits non-random variation. So this is determined using standard SPC rules, which is called the 1-7-7-14. For example, a process is out of control if 1 point falls outside of the control limits, if 7 consecutive points fall on the same side of that center line, if 7 points can continuously trend upward or downward, and if 14 points alternate up and down. These patterns suggest that the variation is caused by a specific factor rather than the normal process variation. Next, please. So first, we're going to look at County 3, Level 1. Here, the individual chart, which is that top one, is out of control as seen in that highlighted bubble. At least one observation exceeds that upper control limit. That indicates that there was at least one signature that required significantly more processing time than what would normally be expected. The moving range chart contains a point above its control limit as well, showing that the difference between 2 verification times was unusually large. County 3, Level 3 is a little bit different. The individual chart is actually in control because every observation falls within those control limits and follows the rest of those rules. However, the moving range chart is out of control. So instead of having a point outside of the control limits, there are actually 7 consecutive points below the center line. You could see in that highlighted bubble again. This satisfies one of the SBC rules and suggests a non-random pattern. In this case, the process appears consistent in the individual chart, but the moving range chart shows an unusual pattern in the variation between consecutive observations. Next. Thank you. To wrap everything up, there are 4 main takeaways from this research. First, level 2 and level 3 signature verification generally showed greater variability in processing times than level 1, with the exception of counties processing signatures during the nighttime. Second, many of the counties and verification levels exhibited special cause variation, indicating that the signature verification process was not consistently stable. Third, future work will focus on identifying the operational and environmental factors that contributed to this variation, even among some counties with similar process characteristics. And finally, this study demonstrates that statistical process control can be successfully applied to election operations, providing election officials with a data-driven approach to identify variation, monitor process performance, and target opportunities for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today, and thank you for the reviewers at the ESRA conference for listening to all the posters presenters at the conference.
Wow. Thank y'all, and just exceptional work. I hope everyone realizes how timely we try to make the ESRA conference as well. If you think about the subjects today, they are things that we are hearing in the news that are sort of the hot button topics. We touched on AI, we touched on voter rolls, and we touched on mail balloting when you get down to the signature verification aspects of that. So, that's one of the goals as well. there are a few questions. One I've already directed April to about sharing her presentation. But April, before we dive into the other topics that I have for all of you to discuss, we did have one participant who asked if you could please identify states that have especially good list maintenance transparency websites, both data and practices, or how they explain their laws, since you were talking about some were easier to get information from than others. So it sounds like you probably know where the good websites are.
Yeah, I have a couple of states off the top of my head, but just to be clear, if I don't name that state, it doesn't mean that they were in the category without good explainers. But Colorado, Texas, and Rhode Island especially had great data transparency. The Rhode Island dashboard, lessons learned report is all about that dashboard and how they built it and how other states could use those processes to hopefully build something as well. As far as processes and laws, Rhode Island and Kentucky had great flow charts explaining the enacted processes. And in several states like North Carolina had great manuals that were less publicly accessible, but were still great for researchers like us who could just read through like the entire guidebook for how to inactivate a voter.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm gonna ask directly of a few of you, but feel free to chime in as a panelist, however order we want to go in for my questions. So the work that you did, the subjects that you covered at the conference are certainly about election administration processes and potentially how to improve or how to help the public better understand. And I'm just curious, because of the type of conference that it is, what does your work convey to election administrators? What can they take away as practical information from your poster, your session at the ESRA conference? And April, since I had started with you, we'll go back to you, and then you can ping pong it over to one of the other panelists.
Sure. Yeah, I think the key takeaway was just the importance of that clarity and transparency, which is obviously something that officials already know. Sometimes when you're really, really steeped in something, it becomes so second nature, and then maybe you realize that not everyone is on the same page. Which is not to say that everyone needs to do everything the same way, but communicating in a clear and transparent way, whatever it is that you are doing, helps voters get on the same page as their state and local officials.
I
And
guess
I
to that
will.
real quickly, so since the websites did come up, I guess finding a way to take it down to a non-election nerd level and have the general public be able to understand is something you were also finding just for your own consumption of the data. But is that so, or?
Yeah, definitely. We thought that the websites that had that great data transparency, we thought it was great for voters who, maybe they read something in the news and then they go onto the websites and they can see clearly everything that's laid out and how these numbers are defined. And yeah, as researchers, it's obviously great for us. We love to mine that information.
All right, now I'll let you pass the invisible mic.
Yeah, I will pass it to Adriana and Leonie.
Thank you. Yeah, one of our takeaways from like our poster is like we collected all these data over like multiple years. So like each like kind of dot that you saw on the poster was like one observation that we like collected over like years from like 4 counties which were on the poster. So like it just like we tried to put like this like engineering approach on top of it, like statistical process control charts are used like in logistics and manufacturing and operations for like decades. It's like kind of like tracking how a process is performing, how to like see early, like if something is changing in this process, if something needs to be adjusted to like keep it like running smoothly. So like that we don't have in the like at some point like a big boom of like something breaks down and we have hours of like need to fix it, but we can see early like something is getting out of trend as an anomaly, like so that we can like adjust it early. So that was like kind of we took like past data to like look at it and see like can we put like a engineering approach on top of it to see if we can help to track like the process, especially for vote by mail, to see if something is changing. And this is like used a lot for like machines. So like when is a machine going out, when is like maybe something is breaking down, when is something maybe need to be replaced, maybe when is something need to be cleaned. So like to make sure that everything is running smoothly, and especially on like election day when we like everyone is like trying to like go through and like nothing, hoping nothing is breaking down.
That's fascinating. It's just an example. Y'all have done a lot to apply engineering principles and processes to elections. And I think that's a really, I hope that my colleagues and peers around the country will dig into some of your tools, not just this piece of research, because you really are bringing resources to us that we might not know otherwise. Not everyone knows about Lean Six Sigma practices and how to get rid of the muda and so forth, but y'all are helping us to do that. So thank you. And thanks to Utah and Colorado for being your subject matters to your research too. Adriana, did you have anything to add, or you want me to hand it off to Bill to give his insight?
You could hand it off to Bill. She pretty much.
Okay. You're on the hot seat, Bill.
Well, I greatly appreciate the work that's been done by Rhode Island. Signature verification is always a hot issue here in Arizona. We could have had some healthy data for you guys as well. So if you want to take a look at that, in fact, I've had some of our students have done some work on signature verification as well. But you raise a great point that there is differentiation not only within counties, but even like here in Arizona, the recorder is responsible for signature verification. That's been one of the issues in the news here, is that the new recorder has been addressing signature verification even in a different way than our previous recorder. So this is really important research, and grateful that you had the opportunity to educate us about it at ESRA.
Thank you. Bill, while you're unmuted, and especially because you're straddling now. You have your background in elections administration. Now you're working with a university, trying to bring practical tools to election officials. What do you think distinguishes? You talked about the peanut butter cup, so that might be your analogy to this question as well. But what do you think distinguishes ESRA from other academic conferences, and really, why participate in ESRA? Why should academics? Why should non-academics? I'll just throw that big bucket question at you.
Yeah, no, I love that question, and I think it's a really easy question to answer because ESRA is so unique in this way. And to have that opportunity for practitioners who need help. I mean, we know practitioners never have the resources that they need. They have hunches, they have premonitions about certain things. But to be able to work with experts in the area, with researchers who can help provide the data that supports them. Not only can it help them with their constituents, with their voters, it can also help with the elected officials who oftentimes are responsible for budgets. So this information can be used to support innovations that might be needed in their offices. At the same time, what I hear from the academics is that they don't want to do research that just sits on the shelf. They want to do research that is going to be used. That's why they've gotten into this field, to help support elections officials specifically and our democracy more broadly. So by engaging in conversations with practitioners or participating in panels or just listening in these panels to practitioners who are presenting, you can literally like hear those light bulbs going off on, this is a new area for research. Oh, this is where the practitioners would be most helped by the research that I'm working on or that I'm considering working on. So it's only when everybody gets together. I mean, we can do Zooms, until we're blue in the face, but there's nothing like being in person, not only being in those panel presentations, but then also the conversations that they take place in the hallways, that might take place before, after karaoke And that was a big mistake on my part to not mention karaoke. It was a big hit, I think, and very grateful for those people who got up and participated. We had, I would say, all music genres were represented during the 2026 Ezra karaoke event.
Now, Bill, that's risky. That might keep people away, or that might draw people to Ezra if we make that a tradition.
That's right. You don't have to go to karaoke.
That's
It's
right.
not a
That's right.
requirement. But if you love karaoke, you're going to love Ezra.
Um, April or Adriana or Leone, anything that Bill said resonate from the research side of why go to Ezra, which is not exactly the traditional academic conference, and what do you gain from it on the research side by having that interaction?
I just want to plus one everything Bill said, especially the karaoke aspect. But we gain so much. We get so much perspective and insights into policy and practice. As researchers, we can only get so much information from like statute and regulation, and we love to know what's actually happening on the ground. Like at this past Ezra, I got a quick and easy answer to a question that I've been agonizing over for like days and trying to just brute force answer through statute. So that was great. And like Bill said, we don't want our research to sit on the shelves. Our work isn't theoretical, it's applied and hopefully actionable. And in order for our research to be effective to election officials, we need to actually speak to election officials at these types of conferences. And I think that everyone who works in election admin in any form, like administrator, advocate, academic research, non-academic research, we should all talk to each other to gain insights that we might not otherwise have considered in our own like nonprofit bubble or local bubble or what have you. And we might also all be working on similar topics from different angles, and getting together helps our collective understanding of election administration, the challenges that we're facing, and helps us find opportunities for collaboration as well. I love Ezra.
Before I switch to the next question, I'll see if our University of Rhode Island students have anything they wanted to add. I saw some nods.
Yeah, I can just agree. Ezra is a great place to be as a researcher. It's like everyone is coming together on this like topic of like elections, and everyone like kind of wants to improve elections. And it's like it's not just the academics who are coming together who are usually like in their silos and like doing their thing. It's like they're coming together with election officials, with like election experts from like other areas. So it's like we all come together, we're all in the same room for like 1.5 days, and like just like exchanging with each other. We're getting like, as academics at least, like feedback from like the people who are doing the work on the grounds, and like getting feedback. So like it just helps us to improve our work in the end of the day, to get the feedback of being like, oh yeah, that is true, or that's not true, or that this is how we do it. Because the US election system is decentralized. So like everyone is doing it different, and like hearing from everyone, every little bits and pieces is like awesome. It's just like helping to make the research better in the end of the day, and like helps to form collaborations, not just within academic, but across.
Thank you. I have a question that I did not like inform you all that you might get asked. But since we're talking about, your research, but there were so many other research topics at the conference this year. Anything that we didn't highlight today that jumped out for you, or a session you particularly got an aha moment or found of particular interest that the listeners and those attending today should go and check out?
So, Karen, if I might, first of all, there was a comment in the chat about my karaoke performance. That was a one-time only. So if you weren't there, it's not going to happen again.
What's our exit music, Bill?
Yeah. Number two, there was a comment from Mindy Romero, and I was remiss in not thanking Mindy for sponsoring the reception, which was a lot of fun. That was great. People to get to let their hair down. Again, so many great panels, but one that was really great, and I had not seen it at Ezra before. Not that I've been in every Ezra conference, but there was an election law panel and a discussion of areas in that realm, and in particular was very interesting was a discussion of the fact that that HAVA, I didn't know this, and I haven't found anyone else who knew this other than the law professor who presented this. HAVA requires states to offer alternative dispute resolution to going to court, which is fascinating because we all know, the courts have really gotten very busy with election litigation in the past few years. So I thought it was a great discussion, very interesting, and I, for one, hope that we see more election law discussions at future ESRA conferences.
Anyone else want to chime in on another session other than yours that caught your attention?
I really enjoyed the media and communication panel that I believe was on the first day. There were presentations about like local election websites, and Liz Stark out of I believe UPenn had a great presentation on her media dashboard. So I love seeing the collaboration between election officials and researchers, and like how we can help with the communication aspect to the public. That was an awesome panel. I also really enjoyed, I think there was a round table that was election security experts, local officials, and practitioners, like talking about I forget what it's called, but basically just the landscape of cybersecurity and how they can work more closely together to tackle these issues and like work through the barriers that exist now, but hopefully are mitigated in the future.
Y'all are making my moderating easy because you're highlighting all the stuff that came to mind for me too. Leone or Adriana, any comments from you?
I really enjoyed the poster. Like, well, we were in the poster session, but like just talking with your neighbors and the other poster presenters was like everyone. It was just a room full of like great ideas, and a lot of students were able to present their ideas and their research. And it's like the next generation of like researchers to come. So it was like great to see that they were able to present their work as well. So like that was a good time there, and everyone who came and listened to us and asked questions.
Fantastic. Well, while I have you unmuted, what's next in your research? And are you preparing something for next year's ESRA?
Yeah, we're currently working on expanding the current work, like the poster, a little bit more. So like we are looking into like to gather more data, to like more processing times, to get like a day-long study from like morning to night, the whole day processing times of signature verification, to create a more comprehensive data set. And then also to look into like which factors kind of interact with the processing time, which are influencing the processing time more like from like the environmental workspace perspective. And also looking into like statistical process control charts is like one KPI, like key performance index. I'm sorry for that. So kind of like looking into other measuring tools to like kind of maybe at some point being able to set the standard, to look into like how can we measure it. I'll find an easier measurement tool to see if something is in control or out of control.
That is fantastic. That is really practical and usable for us, and things we wouldn't necessarily be able to research through when you're in the midst of conducting an election. So fantastic. Adriana, are you working on that project, or are you diving into something else?
No, it's more of same thing as she said, going into it and collecting more data and just seeing what we could do to make things more efficient.
All right. What's on tap for you, April and Bill?
For the list maintenance work specifically, we're working on summarizing the state-specific processes that we found and drafting that technical report on the triggers and policy variation. But in general, CIR is working on a lot of things. We're always putting out resources for officials and policymakers and the public, but around this time of year especially, we're really focused on those public-facing resources.
And at Model, like I mentioned, we're kicking off our fellowship program this week, and then we'll look for an announcement soon we'll be doing a big day-long event September 22nd. We'll have a large AI and elections hackathon where we'll bring students and election officials together to tackle some of the vexing problems out there for elections officials. Then we'll also be having several panels as well as some PBS programming on hot topics in elections here in Arizona for the upcoming general election. So busy time here as well.
You slid in another joke about the temperature, I see. Well, I'm going to close us out. Thank y'all for the questions that you put into the chat. Thank you to our panelists. As ESRA has matured, so has the conference planning. And we've referenced it, but during this year's conference, we did announce the site and date of the 2027 conference. 2027 ESRA will be held in Asheville, North Carolina. If you didn't get my accent just right, that is Asheville, North Carolina, nothing to do with country music in Tennessee. And it will be co-hosted by Western Carolina University and Auburn University. The dates are June 1st through 3rd. And so please mark your calendar. We'll have more information forthcoming for the dates and updates on ESRA. You can always follow along on the ESRA website, which is ESRA-conference.org. So ESRA-conference.org. And this website and other links have been put into today's chat. If you're listening in, go over to our Substack, Books and Ballots, and you'll be able to find the resources there as well. And so to our panelists, thank you again for your contributions today and for this year's conference. And I'll send it back to you, Kyle, to close us out.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks again to all of our fantastic panelists today. This was a really interesting conversation. It's always great digging to ESRA and hearing about all the work that everybody is doing. Like Karen said, we've dropped a lot of links into the chat over the course of today's conversation, including links to the ESRA website, where you can find more about all of these presentations, as well as all the other wonderful work that was presented at this year's conference. You can also find out more about the 2027 conference in Asheville, North Carolina. All that in the chat. We plan to continue hosting Books and Ballots again next month and in future months. So please, like Karen said, sign up for our newsletter and stay tuned for more information on the date and time of those upcoming webinars. And as always, our inbox is open if you have any additional questions. Any questions about Books and Ballots, you can please send those via email to support@readyfortuesday.com. Thank you again, and we'll see everybody next time.